How are you, Jose?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm very, very good. So, you visited Algiers for the first time, right?
Very first time.
Okay, so your impressions.
Well, I was here 1 year ago when I came, but I hadn't had the chance to visit the city. I had a great guide this time.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I felt comfortable in the city. Maybe because I have been to other Arab countries in the past. There is some kind of atmosphere or environment which feels familiar. But yes, it's one place where I would like to return in the future. And also, there are some beautiful landscapes and places in the city.
And a lot of things you haven't seen yet.
I can imagine.
So can you introduce yourself? So what I usually do is ask my guests, how do you want people to think of you? So for example, some people are architects, but they don't necessarily feel passionate about architecture.
Mm-hmm.
So they say, okay, this is my name and I'm a photographer, for example. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So tell me about you. Tell the people who are listening who you are.
Well, when you have said the way I would like to be seen or reminded or by other people who don't even know me, it has to come to my mind a word, a concept in German, which is neugierig, which means curious, basically, kind of avid for knowledge or to know and learn. And well, I have always felt close to that definition of someone who is eager to learn new things, to open enough to try to understand or getting closer to the cultures, people, societies, and so on. And well, putting my feet onto the ground, I am doing right now my thesis. So I'm a PhD student, and I also teach. I teach different things related to Arabic and Islamic studies, but also languages. So even if I have been working for quite a few years now, I don't feel yet I am working, even though I am. I feel more myself like a student, learning different things about my studies, people around me, and different cultures and societies that I am passionate about. So yes, we could say that I am still a PhD student working on Arabic and Islamic studies.
Mm-hmm. So what I find really fascinating about you is all the traveling that you do, and especially working with underprivileged communities. Could you tell me about that?
That would be one of the things that I have tried to foster in my personal life since I was a teenager, I think. I always felt it was an important part for me doing voluntary jobs, and participating in cooperation projects. And I started, as many of us do, in my hometown. I am from Cordoba in Spain. And I remember when I was 18, more or less, I started doing some voluntary things with a couple of associations in my hometown. And well, when you start doing cooperation or when you start as a volunteer, you always have this tendency to believe you can change things. Later on, you realize that it's harder than it seems to be. So you have to lower your expectations. Some people cannot accept that what we can contribute is so little, so some people are disappointed and maybe they don't continue. But I believe that persistence and pursuing that dream or goal of embracing people who are in less privileged positions and situations is very important. So little by little, step by step, I introduced myself more into that kind of life. Whenever I had the time, there were periods of my life where I could not invest much of my personal time into it. But it has taken me, for example, to where I am right now. I'm here in Alger because I have come from the Sahrawi refugee camps a couple of days ago, where we are leading a project with my university, my home university, and some fellow colleagues. And well, I spent there 1 week, and on my way back, I had the chance to stop in Alger and meet you. And yes, some of my trips around, well, some countries, not many of them, have been thanks to this opportunity. And you change your perspective about it. At the beginning, you feel it maybe from more a personal or egoistic way, or a personal growth attached to the experience. We live in a society that maybe is too self-centered and gives too much importance to that idea of gaining experiences. And you encounter many times this narrative of seeing life as if it was a checklist. So checking different items out of your list means that you have a deeper or more meaningful life. That's not an ideal I stand for. I try to see my life or the steps I take in a different way. And when you start doing this kind of voluntary things or cooperation projects, you start to realize that you gain more than you actually give. So you start to decolonize these ideas of helping or the poor ones and the rich ones. And so it's very enriching even today, very much.
Could you tell me more about the project?
Yes, sure, I can. Thank you for asking. The project started a couple of years ago. I was not in that origin, but there were a couple of professors at my home university, Universidad de Sevilla.
Excuse me. Yeah, you
sure.
said because you said you're from Cordoba,
Yes.
which is in Spain.
That's
Have
right.
you mentioned Spain?
I think I have not.
Yes. So for the people who don't know where Cordoba is, yes, keep going.
So yes, I'm from Spain, and I belong to a city which is Cordoba, below Algarve.
which explains your beautiful accent.
Well, some people would then claim that my accent is beautiful, but thank you for saying so. Like in my home nation, in my country, our accent is sometimes regarded as not that good, but
No.
I appreciate it.
So the project.
Going back to the project, so there were these people, professors at my university in Sevilla, who wanted to create some bonds with University of Tifariti, which is the main university in the Western Sahara for the Sahrawi Democratic Arabic Republic. It's a bit hard for me to say because I'm used to say it in Spanish.
Could you say it in Spanish?
República Árabe Saharaui Democrática. So we call it RAST, but I think in English it's SADR. So it's Sadr in Arabic. In English, actually.
Do you know how many people
Are living in the...
no, rather recognize it as a country, as a religion?
Well,
How many countries will recognize it?
I do not know. I ignore how many countries recognize the...
I think Algeria does.
It might be actually, well, the Sahrawi Arabic Democratic Republic. Nowadays, or most of the citizens live in refugee camps,
Which are in?
which are next to the city of Tindouf, and that's southern west Algeria.
Yes.
So Algeria gave this place and shelter for the Sahrawi people almost 50 years ago. And well, it might sound, for people who are not very related to the topic, it might sound a little bit surprising or shocking why people from Spain would care about a people in the middle of the desert of the Sahara. And it's greatly due to the fact that these people when they used to live in the Western Sahara before the 75. It was a Spanish colony. Actually, it was even more than that. It was considered a Spanish province, which I don't know if we could translate as wilaya or something like that.
Well, it depends on the point of view. So what one considers a province, someone else would consider a colony.
Yes, not saying that it was not a colony, but saying that it had also the status of a province, in the sense that these people, or many of these people, had Spanish IDs.
Yes.
So their national identity was very linked to the Spanish one. Not saying that it was not a colony at all. And the thing is that that's one of the reasons why even today Spanish people, society, has a lot of bonds and connections to the Sahrawi people. There are a lot of programs we can talk about later that connect both societies. And yeah, like these professors, going back to the project, they wanted to create some bonds, and they wanted to improve, if possible, the quality of teaching, inserting pedagogical point of views in the way future professors and teachers were trained and educated. That first project did not have the chance to receive financial aid from the university, so it had a more limited scope. But they were able to send to the refugee camps a couple of students back then. At that moment, that was 1 year ago, when these students were in the camps, I also found myself in the refugee camps, in the Sahara refugee camps, thanks to another cooperation project. I was also working in the education field and the Ministry of Women in the camps. And I had the chance to get to know these professors behind that other project. I was invited to some meetings, and we had this crazy idea 1 week before the deadline to present an idea altogether. So we managed, even with restricted time, to create a project which was more limited than the original one they had. So our project this year had the intention to have 6 students staying for around 30-45 days in the camps, in one wilaya specifically, Ausep. There are a few more. So they could live and teach along Spanish teachers there for primary and secondary school. And also the teachers from the university, the professors, would go there for a shorter time, 1 week, 10 days, to do some very specific workshops, working mostly with the teachers. So this year we had the chance to send 4 professors, and also not 6 but 4 students. We had some problems in the way. And we are very happy, really happy about the result, even if it's very humble and very limited. We are trying to make it go organically.
Okay. So could you tell me more about the Sahrawi people? How are they like? Because even though I'm Algerian, these people are living in Algerian territory at the moment, but I have never actually met people from Western Sahara. Could you tell me about the impression they gave you?
Well, maybe I haven't been very specific when I described the situation, because it's of course a very difficult and deep topic and situation. There is also a percentage of the population living in the Western Sahara today. But yes, the project we are leading, it's based in the refugee camps, so to speak. So it's a different thing. And as for the people, well,
maybe before answering the first question, maybe I'm going to ask you, why are they in refugee camps?
It's a very controversial question, and it would require experts to really understand what happened back then. Being very brief, try not to hurt sensitivities, because there are different point of views to the topic.
Because where there are refugee camps, there are sensitivities.
Exactly.
Yes.
No, and nowadays, the time we're living in, we know that there are other refugee camps in the world which are on the spotlight at the moment, right?
Yes.
It's never an easy situation.
Some are under the spotlight and also bomb.
Exactly. It was a metaphorical way to say it. So.
Yeah.
So, well, until the 75, there was this Spanish province and colony in the Western Sahara, which is located next to the Atlantic Ocean, in front of the Canary Islands, which are Spanish islands, below Morocco, above Mauritania, and next to Algeria. And since the 65, we were discussing about that earlier today, there were efforts from the UN, United Nations, to give the independence to the people of the Western Sahara. At the time, the main representatives, even today, of that people were the Polisario front. But it was not an easy transition. In that decade, from the 65 to the 75, 65 being the beginning of those resolutions by the UN, where they are asking Spain to proceed with the transition to independence. At the time, it was not very well done. So it came to a moment in history where countries like Mauritania and Morocco wanted to claim their legitimacy over this territory, whereas Polisario wanted their own independence. So there was a confrontation of interests. And for 3 years, more or less, both Mauritania and Morocco were trying to claim their legitimacy over the territory. If I am not recalling wrong, I think in the 78 Mauritania withdrew, but Morocco still wanted to claim that territory of the Western Sahara. South Morocco was part of their legitimate territory.
Mm-hmm.
And so that has been a dispute since then until today. For over 30 years, they have been at war, Morocco and the Polisario. And I think they started again the war 3-4 years ago, after a kind of long period of peace. So it's a very tense situation.
Yes.
And well, as it always happens with refugee camps, regardless who is more legitimate or not about those claims, there are families which are separated and people who are suffering out of this situation. And well, that led to the forced migration of a huge number of people. Nowadays, there are around 250,000 Sahrawi citizens living in the refugee camps, separated in different wilayat, in different cities like Ausert, Smara, Rabui, Bujdur, Layun, and Dakhla. Dakhla being the farthest one. So yes, it does not seem to have an easy solution at all, and the tensions between Morocco and the Polisario or the Sahrawi people are growing sometimes.
Yes, you told me that it's something that I did not know until very recently while watching an American YouTube video, which was very surprising to me. There's a wall inside the Western Saharan territory, which is also the most bombed and the most mined area in the world, you say.
Well, as for the wall, we are accurate. It could be 6 or 7, I'm not sure right now, lines of walls built over a couple of decades since the beginning of this situation, this conflict, separating what the Sahrawi people called the occupied Western Sahara, and they liberated the free Western Sahara. The liberated Western Sahara, it's a small fringe to the east, and that's the area which is mostly mined today. There are different calculations. They estimate that there might be around 5 or 8 million mines.
That's a lot of mines.
For a population of 250,000. So it's
it's 20 mines for every person.
Yeah, the average is quite high.
Actually 40. So 4 times 8.
It depends. If you take 5 or 4, 6, 7 millions, there are different calculations.
Yeah, 32 per person.
Also, like last year when I was in the camps, I had the chance to collaborate with an association called Asabin. Asabin being an association protecting mine victims. And that connects a little bit to the question you had before about how the Sahrawi people. Because there are still even today many victims of these mines. Partly because the Sahrawi people was partly nomadic. So, the frontiers or the borders between what today is Mauritania, Algeria, Morocco, or the Western Sahara were not that clear. And for people who are using the land for the sheep or the livestock, maybe it's hard to recognize a border, right?
Of course.
On the desert.
It's not a natural thing.
Exactly. So many nomads even today suffer from these mines and they get injured, or also children playing. Unfortunately, many people still today suffer from these mines. Animals as well. Yeah, one of the main issues with mines or mined areas, which might not be well known by the public, is that even if you do big efforts to cleanse, to erase, to remove every mine as possible, it will never be enough. You can never say it's 100% free of mines. Also because of the place where they are. These are dunes, it's the desert, so there are winds moving around the mines, there are winds changing the dunes, so maybe they get covered by a lot of sand and they get uncovered a few months later, or they can be transported hundreds of meters or even more. So it's very hard to say that an area that has been mined before is no longer mined.
Yes, we have history here in Algeria with mines. So the borders between Tunisia and Algeria has been heavily mined between 1954 and 1962 during the War of Independence, because a lot of freedom fighters, Algerian freedom fighters, were smuggling themselves and weapons through the Tunisian borders, which was already independent at the time. So Tunisia was helping with Algerian independence, and to combat that, France put a lot of mines. So of course, we have a lot of victims of mines even today. And one of this is like a funny anecdote. One of the ways that the people who lived in those places used to do to unmine the place was to make a mule walk through the area, and the poor mule would eventually walk on a mine and be killed by it. And these people would say, a mule and not a kid, a mule and not a human being. So eventually we had experts from the USSR who came to help unmine the place, but it's still mined even today. It's almost impossible to demine it completely. Yeah.
It's a matter of, as you say, a lot of time until you can, and maybe it will never be completely safe.
Thousands of years. I don't know if they have an expiry date, these mines.
I don't know exactly. Like, we had the chance to visit the museum where they had a lot of these mines, and the problem is that they are very light. It's less than 1 kilogram. And actually, they are manufactured by different countries. You can find mine from France, Germany, US, Morocco, almost everywhere. So it's very, very hard. And at the end, when there are these confrontations, it's the people who suffer the most. Right? So yes, there are, going back to the question you had, there are like 6-7 lines of war, and they divide both parts. But even today, most of this, because the Western Sahara, it's very desertic, not very populated. And almost 40% of the population lives in Bayou. I'm talking about the so-called occupied Western Sahara, from the perspective of the Sahrawi people, of course. And that's almost half of the population living in just one city. So it kind of gives an idea of, because it is a very extensive, very big area, but almost all the population lives in a very specific points of that area.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So tell me more about the Sahrawi people.
Well, even if they come from a place which is kind of far from Spain, the moment where a Spanish person goes to the camps and meets the Sahrawi people, we feel very welcomed and overwhelmed by all the hospitality that characterize the Sahrawi people and also other peoples like that. And there are many commonalities, many common things between them and the Spanish society. If I think of the Sahrawi people I met studying my degree at my home university, or the Sahrawi people I have met in the camps, the 2 times I had the chance to be there, I think of resilience as one of the main adjectives that come to my mind to describe their capacity to resist a never-ending situation of conflict, and their ambition and desire to make true that dream of having their own nation, own country, their own land. They are never exhausted. Mm-hmm. At the same time, I have always felt at home. You feel as if having a second family when you are with them. I only spent 1 week now in Ausset, this wilaya, and well, Khadija and all her family were like a second mom to me, the way they treated me. Actually, one of the reasons why I feel I see now a little bit sick is because I got sick in the camps a few days ago, and I'm still trying to recover from it.
Yes.
And well, it was amazing how well they treated me. I would have never thought that they would care so much, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yes, really lovely people, filled with passion and with dreams and love and happiness.
Yeah. So we met in the MEM Summer Summit, yes, which is a summit that gathers young people from the region of the Mediterranean region as well as the Middle Eastern region. And so, yeah, tell me about that experience. How you perceive that experience? What have you learned from the people you met? Maybe from the lectures you attended, maybe from the interactions, or maybe even from visiting Switzerland.
Well, for me, it was the first time I was in Switzerland. I guess it was the same for you.
Yes.
So that was quite interesting. But well, I never actually thought I would be chosen or elected to attend the summit, because I believed, and I saw later when I attended, that there were really inspiring leading figures and
yes.
people there. People working for the EU or for the UN, or people leading important revolutions in their countries, or I mean, you could see that most of the people attending the summit were very inspiring as for the biographies. So, maybe I see myself from a more humble perspective, and I consider myself lucky enough to have attended it, mostly for the opportunity to meet people like you, people like some of our colleagues, and having the chance to share those days with such a diverse variety of young leaders was amazing, because you don't really get the chance to have breakfast, lunch, and to spend hours with people from so many different countries. I don't know how you perceived it.
Oh yeah, it was first of all the thing that really touched me was how easy it was for all of us to become friends. I think it took us only a day. I don't think it was more than a day. We just met, spent a few hours together, had breakfast and lunch together, and that was enough to call each other friends. No matter where we came from, no matter the history, no matter the difference in culture, the way we dress, the way we speak, as long as we could communicate with each other, that was enough. As I said to Radio Gwen, if seminars like that were more common, there would be no wars. Because, I don't know, I don't imagine myself going to war against the country where these friends of mine come from. So yeah, it develops empathy, which is something that is very, very important. And also for me, what I learned is the ability to separate the people and the context of their country or their ideology or their culture, and especially ideology. Because the thing with ideologies is that you could disagree with them. Same with religions, for example. Religion is a kind of ideology, I guess. So, for example, we met a few people from a few countries that had very different ideology, but that really didn't stop us. We had some arguments sometimes. That really didn't stop us from becoming really good friends. And this is something that was very important to me. I had to actually go through that experience to see it for myself, to be able to confidently call myself someone who is tolerant, who is open, who is so yes, I'm very, very proud of that, and I'm very happy that humanity has this ability to put things in context. So what have you learned? Is there something specific?
Well, following what you were saying, one of the main things is like the dehumanization of the other is needed to believe that killing another people is something that can be done, right? So, well, as you say, when you spend time with people that you believe to be so different to you, and then you turn out to realize that they have so many things in common, well, things get a little bit trickier, right? It's not so easy to see what's black and white. I had the chance also a few years ago to participate in a UNESCO program called Connecting Cultures, where they took us for a couple of weeks to Oman in the desert, and we had the chance to walk around the desert. Basically, the only thing we had to do was put in our tents at the end of the day and then walking and speaking. It was kind of the same, right? One person from different countries around the Mediterranean, Europe, and Arab countries mostly, and you became friends. You became friend of these people.
Yes.
And you started to see how similar you were. So after a few days sharing 24 hours, sleeping together, eating together, going through the same challenges together, difficulties, struggling to reach your final destination. There was a moment where difficult, deep questions started to happen, right? And it was very nice to see how the connection, the bond that we have created allowed those questions to be asked in a safe environment. And sometimes I think it's a matter of sharing time with the one who is not like you to understand that we have much more in common than we believed at first.
Exactly.
So that, of course, was like the most precious experience and thing that I could learn from the summit. Like having that time and space that we don't usually give each other.
Yes.
To live.
Yes. Because seeing there's a humanization about seeing someone eat. Like, okay, that guy is from an enemy country. He's the enemy, but he's having breakfast like this. So you realize that it's really more than just ideas and ideologies. And also one thing that I was able to do was through I would say humbly skillful conversation and skillful maybe argumentation or skillful debate. I was able to open some people's eyes on why I believe what I believe. So I am strongly maybe a bit sensitive even about the question of colonization. So whenever there is a separatist movement in any country, I ask myself, are these people colonized? Do they need support? Or are these people just separatists? Like, for example, I asked you yesterday, how do the Sahrawi feel about their identity? Right, and you gave me a certain answer. And so I was able to actually make some people question their belief, while myself actually doubting my belief as well, like asking questions to myself. So I'm not saying that I'm necessarily right or 100% right, but at least I let people be curious and not question, but review their belief, which is something that's very, very, very important and very hard to do. Reviewing what you believe is not something easy to do, especially when you have spent all your life being taught to believe a certain way. So that is something that I was very happy to be able to have done. So yeah, Switzerland is beautiful.
But following the idea that you just said,
Yeah.
I was remembering, because for a couple of years I have facilitated online meetings with young people from Europe, Asia, the Arab world, also America, Latin America, North America. So these were meetings that happened once a week for around 6-8 weeks, more or less, even 9. So every week we had we had 2 hours to speak about different topics. The topic of conversation was not an excuse, but it gave us the opportunity to gather for those 2 hours and exchange our perspectives and opinions about maybe climate change or about migration or about the digital world, so to speak. Usually these 8-9 long courses, week-long courses, had a common theme, right? So I worked as a facilitator in these courses, and my role was basically enabling a helpful and safe environment to happen where everyone could feel comfortable enough to share what they believed and to share their emotions and ideas and so on. One of the main things I learned when training as a facilitator, and then I had the chance to prove it actually performing the role of facilitator, was that it was not about the facts, it was about the emotions. So the main thing behind these encounters, or behind these gatherings, meetings, was not to teach to each individual student from Poland or from Spain or from Algeria what is right or wrong about climate change. The main idea behind what we were doing, what I was doing as well, was raising the question of why that person is thinking that way. And at least trying to create the channel to convey the answer to that why. So at the end of those 8-9 weeks, we could try to understand, to have more empathy towards the other. That doesn't mean that you believe the other is right or wrong, but at least you understand a little bit better why that person is thinking that way. So sometimes maybe we tend to see the world in a very factual way. We want black and white. We want answers. We want to know what's right and what's wrong. And it might be a philosophical or ethical question, but sometimes I believe it's more enriching for all of us human beings to focus on the why. So why do we feel that way? Because it makes us closer to the idea of the other is a reflection of myself. It's not someone who is opposite to me and different, but someone who reflects what I am. So there is this idea of otherness, which I believe it's very important to understand these things.
Yes. Another thing that I keep dearly from the adventure is all the conversations we had. So first thing, when I arrived to Switzerland, I thought, okay, whenever I have free time, I'm going to explore the area. And I think you had the same idea. So that made us quickly friends. And I remember having a multiple hour conversation or debate with you about the nature of reality. What is reality? Is it relative? Is it fixed? Is it solid? Is it malleable? So we had conversations during the MEM Summer Summit that didn't necessarily have to do with geopolitics, but also about how we perceive the universe itself, which was very good. Another thing that I remember is when we were going to Montbray by bus, and there was a German-speaking Swiss who was, I think, interested in my camera, and who turned out to be an astronomer. So I only know a few words in German. Too, I guess. So I forgot German. I lost all my German, but yeah. So as soon as he spoke in German, instinctively I turned towards you and I was like, José, what is he saying? Could you tell him this and that? Without even knowing that you spoke German, but for some reason I guessed that you did. So how many languages do you speak?
Well,
I think me and Sana, we counted. It was almost to double digit.
Well, that would be how many languages I have studied. Because it would be a different thing. I've had the chance by different circumstances and coincidences to have studied around 16 or 17 different languages. But of course, I am not able to speak in all of them at all.
But I saw you, for example, in Algeria. You can manage yourself in Arabic.
Well, that's partly because I have studied a degree in Arabic and Islamic studies, and I have studied Arabic for quite a few years. I am not fluent in any lahja, in any dialect, although I might know some words. For example, in the Sahrawi refugee camps, they say "shtar" to like "how are you?" La paz, shtar, alhamdulillah, inshallah. So there might be some words which are different, but you can kind of communicate in the Arabic Fusha, in the modern standard Arabic.
Yes.
Out of these languages, there are around 6 or 7 languages with which I am able to communicate and have conversations, but it's kind of interesting, that idea of what languages do you speak? Because what do we understand for speaking a language? To which level?
If you want, I can give you a definition and you use it as a metric.
Okay.
So if you can manage to communicate on a basic level with another human being using that language.
Well, in that case, as I said, around 6-7 languages that I am able to. English, French, German, Italian, Arabic, Spanish, and well, I used to know Dutch, which is very similar to German. I have forgotten a little bit in the last couple of years, but yes, those will be the ones. But as I said, it's basically because it happened. I mean, at the beginning when I was younger, I was interested in learning them, but not because I wanted to. I mean, of course, like communicating is the final goal. It's very enriching when you can go to another country and people appreciate a lot that you can say something in Arabic or something in a different language. But I was very curious about the structure behind the language. There is this quote, I hope I don't misquote it, by Heidegger, which is "Die Grenzen meiner Sprache sind die Grenzen meiner Welt," which means like the limits or the borders of my language are the limits, borders of my world. So our languages shape the world we live in, and they gave, there is an ontological connection between the language and the world and the way we perceive it. So I was very interested, I don't know why, to try to understand what was behind. That led me, and also because the chance happened, that led me to study for some years Chinese or Japanese or Portuguese, or when I was teaching German in India, I was very interested to learn Telugu, which is the language they speak at the region where I was. So, it was a way for me to feel closer to those societies, and also it was a way to discover about myself. It was a way to reflect about what language is, and that brings to me an idea that Abbas Kiarostami is a filmmaker, Iranian filmmaker, that I do my research about. And he used to say that he preferred Iranian poets rather than Western philosophy, because Western philosophy had a very prescriptive and descriptive way to approach the world. So Western philosophy tended to describe and prescribe how the world was, ontologically speaking, right? Whereas Iranian poetry suggested in a more sensual, metaphorical and poetic way how to approach life. So life was not so much defined, it was more open to the reader to decide what it was. And I feel very close to this second way of perceiving reality, which I think it also connects to those conversations we had while walking around the streets of Lugano.
Yeah, streets of Como and then yes. How does a language, when you learn it, can you give me examples? How did your life change when learning a language? For example, I can attempt to answer this question to give you an idea of what I mean. When I learned English, it was like a big window that I opened. Before I spoke English, I was very fluent in French. And I had a very different idea of the world when I spoke French before I spoke English. And speaking English made me see things very differently. One of the things that came to my mind after I learned English was that before I learned English, actually, I thought that, for example, experts must be right. They can't be wrong, right? As soon as I learned English, I started seeing personalities, TV personalities, authors in books, some movies that criticized what the expert said. So suddenly I was open to different ideas. For example, one conversation that one of the lecturers at the MEM tried to avoid, who's a French lecturer, how many times, because he, I think one of the participants mentioned a conspiracy theory, which is that in Iraq, ISIS is still today funded by the US in a few different ways, such as packages that are parachuted into ISIS bases, so that contain food, ammunition, etc. And the lecturer said this is just a conspiracy theory, and to him a conspiracy theory is like something that people with very little knowledge come up with from their imagination. And so I went to him after the lecture and I told him, look, a lot of conspiracy theories about the CIA throughout the decades, throughout the 20th century, turned out to be true, like even really, really crazy kind of conspiracy theories. So this is not something that I would have learned from French-speaking media or mediums. So tell me a few examples of things that you have learned by learning a new language. I'm mostly interested in Arabic, to be honest.
It's a very interesting question. I wouldn't claim, like, because your conclusion was kind of French-speaking people wouldn't have, or the French-speaking world wouldn't have introduced to me this concept of what you said about conspiracy.
It's not very strict, but it's less like it. Yes.
I wouldn't risk, or I wouldn't dare to say such a claim about French being or having those conclusions. Maybe what I have learned from languages is more basic. I don't know. Generally speaking, when you start learning new languages, you start to see those limitations of your own language or of the languages, coming back to the quote I said before. Maybe you remove the glasses you had before, which were a forced perspective on reality coming from your language. And those glasses made you believe, before understanding how languages are a tool that enable us to understand the world, but at the same time they force us to understand it throughout a concrete perspective, right? Seeing or appreciating, understanding these limits gives you an idea of something else. There is something which my language might not be able to acquire or to gain or to comprehend completely.
Mm-hmm.
There is this poem by Rumi which I loved, which is, "What is the secret? God is one. The sunlight splits when entering the windows of the house. This multiplicity lies in the cluster of grapes. It is not in the juice made from the grapes." I hope I didn't misquote it.
Amazing that you know poetry.
It's one of the poems I love the most. It continues. It's a beautiful poem. The bird of vision is flying towards you with the wings of desire. It ends.
Yeah, but Rumi didn't speak English.
He did not. Actually, the original is in Farsi, which is one of the languages I have been learning the last couple of years, but I am not able to quote it in Farsi. I learned it in English, and that's how it and maybe I learned the version of the translator, which would be a different topic.
Which is fine.
So that's fine. It's still a beautiful poem.
Yeah.
But the thing is that I do believe the languages are the window sills that filter the sunlight. Using the metaphor that capacity of language is that sunlight, and what we perceive is the light filtered by the window sills. The same idea of the juice and the grapes, right? But the window sills can be Spanish, English, Arabic, and others. So I think the moment you realize that your language does not allow you to have a full comprehension of the substance of the universe or the world of reality, maybe you become more humble in your desire to know what is right and what is wrong. And also, those were some of the conversations we had about truth or love or even God.
So maybe to revise a bit of that conversation, I think what I understand, so correct me if I'm wrong, my claim was that truth is absolute. And we have to reach it, but it's like we can converge towards it, but we can never completely touch it. And I think your claim was that truth can be different things and can be flexible. It can be
not quite.
I'm not sure. Maybe I didn't understand you.
It was a long time also.
Yes.
Like I do believe, philosophically speaking, the concept of truth, love, or are absolute, universal. They have to be. But something universal, it's at the same time eternal, never changing. These are values attached to the idea of God, actually. And well, it could be hard for me to claim there is something which is never ending or with no beginning, no end. So it would be hard for me to, without faith, to sustain that there is an absolute truth, an universal truth. But I do believe it is a very powerful concept that can be a leading force to us all.
It can be maybe a bit reliable when you trust that there are rules that do not change, like not constant, like stable rules.
For me, it's more about faith in that sense. But in any case, it's a very powerful force to be led by, right? Mm-hmm. Trying to reach the truth, whether or not it is absolute or universal. Mm-hmm. And going back to the languages,
yes,
I kind of understand languages as these different tools that filter reality, right? Or what we live on a daily basis. Using another example or image, it would be like trying to build a sandcastle using different tools. If you have just a bucket, or if you have a spoon, or if you have your hands, maybe the result is quite similar. If you really try hard using a bucket, a spoon, or your hands, maybe the final sandcastle can be almost the same. But the way you have reached that result cannot be the same. The process is different. And there might be some variations in the final result. So I do kind of think of languages in a similar way. Coming to Arabic, for example, and Arabic itself, it allowed me to also understand my language better. I'm a Spanish speaker. It's my mother tongue. For example, it comes to my mind words like bahath, or bahatha and istabhatha, verbs like this, which, if you translate them to Spanish, they are not connected to the same root. Buscar, investigar. It's like to look for something, bahatha, to do research, istabhatha. So these are words in Spanish, buscar, investigar, which are not, of course, I mean, there can be other translations, but these connections of words, because bahatha and istabhatha belong to the same root, and Istabhatha is a word that derivates from Bahasa. It made me understand, okay, so the connotations that I might find between words like investigar and buscar are not simply connotations in Arabic. They are denotations. They have a sense because of their etymology, because of their meaning. So it allowed me, and it still allows me to think of my language from a different perspective, right? Or also, for example, like the capacity. Well, this is something more poetical, but
Go ahead.
I always admired when I was studying Arabic the apparently pure mathematical structure it seemed to have, right? And I was mesmerized. And maybe this is a very Borgian idea. I love Borges, the Argentinian writer. He wrote The Library of Babel, La Biblioteca de Babel, which is a short story where he talks and describes this apparently never-ending library where you can find all kind of books, right? So,
which actually exists today.
You mean internet?
You
mean ChatGPT?
No, not that thing. There's actually a website called
Library of Babel.
Library of Babel.
Okay.
Have you?
I think I don't know.
I think I have told you about it. I'm not sure. So it's. I'm so sorry for interrupting you, but so what they did, actually, someone programmed an algorithm to put together every combination of letters, space, comma, and dot in a short paragraph possible, and like put them in a big library. So everything that could be said in a short paragraph can be found in that library. So that library is really, really big, but it's something that's mathematically possible. Like you could put just A until the end of paragraph, or A and then B and then A until the end of the paragraph, and so on until you have reached every single combination. So of course there are more combinations than there have been seconds or milliseconds in the history of the universe. So it's, in order to read the whole library at the pace of a human being, you would need like an eternity, quite literally. But every single truth and every single lie exists in that library. Like you could find inside those books the detailed description of the way you were born, or a prediction of your future, as well as a slightly false prediction of your future, as well as a completely false or many completely false predictions of your future, which is quite
shocking.
Yeah. Continue, please.
Well, yes, that's exactly what Borges' short story is about, and the librarians are trying to look for that secret book that tells their story, right? So with Arabic, it happened to me something similar, because I learned about the Arabic roots for the verbs, and how most of the language is based on these triliteral roots. Verbs like bahatha or kataba or kharaja and so on and so on. So it was quite shocking for me, because I was not used to approach my language in that way. And I know on a daily basis that's not how Arabic speakers relate to their language, because at the end, they use the words with the definition they attach to them, and they don't think about these mathematical or philosophical things behind it. These grammatical concepts are not part of the daily routine of an Arabic speaker. But it was very beautiful to me, that thought of, okay, so if there are 27 words, and if we could combine them in groups of 3, that's a finite number.
Yes.
If I'm not mistaken, it's 27 times 27 times 27. Well, my math friends will correct me if I'm wrong. And that might be around 25,000 to 30,000 possibilities, but then you can derive these verbs, and then you can, from these derivative verbs, you can have اسم الفاعل, اسم المفعول, المصدر, and many other nouns, right? So it comes to the idea that the Arabic language is a finite container, right? And it was very poetical for me because it was everything that could be said, that was said, that could be said in the future, will be said, is contained in these 27 letters. Space, comma, and point, and dot, which is what mesmerized, I guess, Borges as well, right? How just these few letters could contain a seemingly infinite knowledge. So yes, that was one of the things that motivated me the most when I was learning Arabic many years ago.
You can find actually this philosophy also can help direct, say, a researcher in quantum mechanics to take a direction in his research in the attempt to find new discoveries. For example, I was reading this book by Carlo Rovelli, who's an Italian astrophysicist and also science rigorizer, who was given an example of who was like showing how the universe cannot be infinite. It had to be infinite. It had to be finite, even though it seems infinite. So he gave an example by mentioning the story of Le Marchand de Sable, so the dealer of sand. So this dealer of sand in the story attempted to count every single grain of sand in his beach to have an estimate on how much is the money he was going to make. And the whole point of the book is that even though there are seemingly an infinite number of grains of sand, there is actually a finite and defined number. And this is like something that puts you in the direction of quantum gravity and things like that, where there is actually a finite distance in the universe, like a minimal distance. Because a lot of people think that no matter how much you zoom inside the atom and then inside the nucleus of the atom and then inside the protons and the neutrons, you can find elementary particles, and then even inside elementary particles maybe you will find something. What he was claiming is that there's a faith and belief before actually studying these things that there is a finite limit where you would say, okay, the universe is built upon this rule. And actually a lot of scientists, including Einstein or even Stephen Hawking, have attempted to find this finite equation that can explain everything. So they failed thus far. But yeah, I've recently watched some YouTube videos that give you an idea of how big the universe is. Yeah, the videos can be like just 5 minutes, but trying to wrap your mind around the size of the universe, it's too much. It's like crazy how small we are compared to, say, our solar system is in a galaxy which itself contains trillions of solar systems, just like ours, which is itself one in trillions of other galaxies, which are themselves in I don't know how many galaxy clusters, which is only the observable universe, because we know that there is a limit to how much we can observe, and beyond that limit we cannot observe. So yeah, it's something that humbles you, and even sometimes you can go from philosophy and then discover things that are real. So, since we're talking about these things, you are very interested in languages. So a lot of people say that mathematics is a language. How do you perceive from your own lens mathematics as a language? Because a lot of people claim that it's the language of the universe. Do you perceive it as more of a language that's invented by humans? Or it's something that's derived from the universe itself?
Well, I do love mathematics, and I do love the universe and astronomy in general. I don't feel knowledgeable enough to answer that question, but I do believe mathematics to be a language, in the sense that they describe reality in a sense. If we answer they are a language, they can also make us perceive reality in a wrong way sometimes. So that's a very interesting question. Up to which point mathematics are the universal language able to describe everything, or is it not? And I know because I have friends who study mathematics and philosophy and these very heavy stuff. I know this is an issue in some sectors of mathematical studies. So well, I wouldn't know what to answer. I think you should bring a guest who knows much more than me about maths. But I do like to believe mathematics are also a language that enables us to understand reality in a sense.
Yes. Before we finish, I would like you to tell me about your PhD studies. So you study, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's, Oriental culture or Islamic studies?
Yes, well, I'm studying mysticism, tasawwuf, Sufiya. Mysticism in Iranian cinema, mostly.
So is this the subject of your PhD?
In a very wide way, yes.
Okay.
Yes, so I'm interested in how there is a certain cinema which has these elements of mysticism, right? When I think of mysticism, I do this analogy between mysticism and religion, which I also make between poetry and literature. So for me, mysticism is to religion what poetry is to literature. Of course, I'm talking here metaphorically, but I do believe mysticism is the heart, the essence of religion, as I do believe poetry is the essence of literature. And it doesn't have to be a verse, it can be a narrative text, what I consider to be poetic, right? So mysticism has been usually studied through the word, through the written word. We have mystical poets like Rumi, I quoted him before, even Arabi, San Juan in Spain, Santa Teresa, many others, right? And there have been many scholars who have tried to do research about the poetics of these writers. So my approach is kind of trying to do the same, trying to write about these poetics, but not through the written word, but through the moving image. Okay. I'm basically or mostly interested in Abbas Kiarostami. He was an Iranian filmmaker who unfortunately died a few years ago, who was very loved in the international
stage.
Yes, thank you. And well, he knew about mysticism because he read, actually he edited several anthologies by Rumi, Al-Attar and other writers. So he had this very deep knowledge of poetry. His anthologies, by the way, were not very traditional because he shortened the original poems. He edited the original poems, and he remained with what he believed to be the core of the poem, the main ideas, the main images. So he created these anthologies. It was not just to put different poems together because he believed they had something in common, but he edited them. And mostly through modern poetry, people like Sohrab Seperi, Farrokhzad, and other writers, he acquired this sensitivity towards reality that characterized Iranian poetry, which at a time and even today was part of the daily life.
Yes.
So yes, I try to study Kiarostami's filmography, and also I connect him with other filmmakers, of course, trying to build these poetics of his cinema from the perspective, the lenses of the mysticism that he inherited, that he lived through and by, and that I believe also he turned. So not only he inherited mysticism, but he developed a very personal aesthetics, a very personal way of looking, way of seeing at things, which I do believe to be very mystical in a sense. He had a quote which was, "Sometimes we are unable to see what we have in front of us unless it is inside a frame which connects to the 24 frames per second, which is cinema, and also the frame which is the window through which we look at the world." Right? And yes, and actually when you were talking and remembering our wanderings around Lugano, Como, and other places, talking about different things, subjects, I remembered how much he loved to drive around, because for him the act of driving and having a window in front of him, which acted as a frame, was the best way for him to think, to reflect. So whenever he needed to think about different things, he took the car, he drove around, he had a window through which he could see the world, and he thought while driving. Right?
Yeah. That's something that I can relate to. Yes. Jose, thank you so much for coming here, for being on this podcast. Any last word?
Thank you for having me, the first thing. I feel very honored to be here.
Same here. Yeah.
And well, everything I want to tell you, I can tell you in private, but as for the podcast, I really hope it continues growing and reaching more and more people, because you give the opportunity to people like me, and I'm sure the rest of them will be much more interesting than me, to speak in a place
signature Jose humbleness.
in a place where we can feel comfortable, safe, secure. So thank you for that.
You're welcome. Thank you very much. Till next time.
Till next time.
Yes. Bravo. That was really good. Wow. It's going to be a very soothing podcast.
Soothing, relaxing.
Relaxing.
Yes, I have a relaxing voice.
You have a relaxing voice.
You too.
Yes. Wait, before you go, I want to take a photo of you
That makes sense.
being on the podcast. This is the first time I'm gonna do this with a guest.
I don't usually take a photo.